Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Kovacs here for Erev Shabbat Toldot. Mishnah Yomi is finishing up chapter 5 of Bava Batra with Mishnayot Yud and Yud Aleph. Here's Mishnah 10. Hasiton, the wholesaler or distributor, mekaneach midotav achat l'shloshim yom. He needs to clean off his measuring containers, what he uses to pour out and distribute the wine or oil, every 30 days, so that it doesn't, we don't have drops drying out and reducing the measurement. A balabayit and a regular homeowner, a regular guy, achat l'shnemasar chodesh, once every 12 months. The idea being he doesn't use them as often. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer chiluf hadvarim. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he says, really, the distributor who's using these things very often, maybe every day, to measure out the merchandise, because they're using them so often, they stay clean. What you use all the time, you've got to keep it clean and keep it moving. Whereas someone who doesn't use something very often, there's more of a chance that things will adhere and dry off. And it's really, it's a lesson. The mitzvot that we don't do very often, maybe we're a little rusty, and maybe it's important to review the halakha and to think about what we're doing before we do it. And one of the reasons we say shechianu on Yom Tov and before certain mitzvot is sort of to remind us, hey, we don't get to do this very often. This is exciting. Let's feel exciting and new for mitzvot we don't get to do all the time. The Mishnah adds, Chenvani, a shopkeeper, mekaneach midotav pa'amim b'Shabbat. He should wipe out his measuring containers twice a week. And remember, yesterday, this shopkeeper is the one who, he's measuring out to a lot of customers, so he's not required to tilt the container to get those extra 3 drops out. So there might be a few drops at the bottom of his containers. He needs to keep them clean. And he should wipe off his weights, what he uses to weigh as a counterweight to weigh out merchandise once a week, so they don't get, schmutz on them. Umikaneach moznayim al kol mishkal, and needs to wipe out the pans of the scale that he uses to measure for every weighing. So there's no, remnants of the last weighing left in the pans of the scale, because that would be cheating his customers. Now on to Mishnah 11, which elaborates on this. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, when does this apply? Bilach, when we're dealing with merchandise that is moist. Understand, like wine and oil, but also things like a cut of fish or a cut of meat, where there's some liquid that's oozing out. Aval b'yavesh, if these things are really truly dry, eino tzarech. You don't have to clean them out so often. You're not having little drops dry off and adhere to the surface. Now, these halachot are actually derived from a pasuk in Devarim chapter 25 that you need to have a hin tzedek. You need to have an honest weights and measurements. You need to make sure your weights and measurements are not dirty, are not too big, not too small, not getting rusty and worn out. But on that topic, our sages derive that we actually go above and beyond having honest weights in favor of the customer. Lo tefach. You have to tilt the scales in favor of the customer by a tefach. Now we're going to see this is dealing with a full size, a large scale. So as a tefach is a hand's breadth, the width of a hand, that's actually a pretty big tilt. We're dealing with a pretty large amount of merchandise. But the idea is, after you have your honest weights or measures, you tilt the scale in favor of the customer, literally by tilting the scale, and he gets a little bit more than he deserves, just in case your weights and measures are slightly off. We don't want to be doing an aveira of stealing from the customer. However, and the Gemara explains, this is dependent on the local custom. So, hayashoka lo ayin ba'ayin, the Mishnah says, if he's weighing out exactly eye to eye, he's seeing eye to eye, the scales are exactly flat, then notin lo gerumav, then you do have to give him that extra. So if the custom in that location is not to literally tilt the scales, then you actually have to give the customer a little bit of extra. How much? Echad le'asara balach, 1/10 out of 10. So 1/10 of a tenth, or 1% of liquid merchandise. Echad le'esrim, and 1/20 of 1/20 biyavish. And for dry things, 1 out of 400. So 1/4% is the tilting of the scale amount. And again, as we noted yesterday, a little tiny amount of liquid does stick to the container, so the tilting of the scale was a bit larger in favor of the customer by liquids. Finally, the Mishnah adds, Makom shenachagu lamud bedoka, a place where the minhag, the custom, is to use a small container, and you'd use it a few times to pour out for the customer. Lo yimad begosa, don't just use one big container. And begosa lo yimad bedoka, and not vice versa either. Just stick to the commonly accepted business practices, and people won't have questions about your business practices. Limchok, If it's mahok, it's smooth, meaning the container is leveled off. It's absolutely even with the top of the container. Lo yigdosh. Don't heap it over. Don't have a heaping, rounded top above the lid. Ligdosh lo yimhok, and not vice versa either. In any event, you follow the local custom of the merchants and customers, and everything should be above the board. Tizkulu mitzvot, Shabbat shalom.